The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. Bock score from Nedick's at the Old Garden on 49th Street. I'm Ralph Tycho with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. David Hubler is here this evening to join Hal Bock, and I will ask the question of Hal. What's the score?
Good evening, everybody. Well, the score today is a discussion of the New York Yankees and how they run their business. They had Old-Timers Day at Yankee Stadium, which is an annual event. Nobody does it better. They invite a bunch of players from the past. The fans go nuts. It's really quite a scene. And this was the 40th anniversary of the 1978 championship team. And so they were celebrating those players in particular. Players like Bucky Dent, who hit a 3-run homer in the playoff game, memorable 3-run homer in the playoff game against Boston to clinch the pennant, helped clinch the pennant. Ron Guidry, who won 25 games and the Cy Young Award that year. Reggie Jackson, who hit 27 home runs and drove in 98 runs. But somebody was missing. Goose Gossage was not in the building. Gossage was the guy who they called out of the bullpen whenever they were in a tough spot. He led the league with 27 saves. He finished 55 games that season. He won 10 games. And he was a monster on the mound. But the Yankees chose not to invite him. And the reason for that is that Goose was critical of analytics in baseball, which is a major part of the Yankee equation. And he was critical of the general manager, Brian Cashman. Well, here in America, we have freedom of speech, at least for the moment. And he chose to use it, and the Yankees punished him for it. There are vindictive operations sometimes, and it bothers me a lot when they take it out on people, take out their venom on people who really belong in that building. Goose Gossage will handle it. You know, he's a tough guy, but it was not right for him not to be in that building that day. And so that was what I wrote about this week, and it's open to discussion, what you think of the Yankees and how they do business.
Start with David.
Okay. As a lifelong Yankees fan who's been to many Old-Timers games, not since 2 years ago, however, I find it so incredible that an organization that really, in one sense, relies on its history to perpetuate the I won't call it a myth because it's not really a myth, but to perpetuate the actual lore of the Yankees would make such a blunder. And as you said in the column, Hal, I mean, the fans love it. The place is packed. It's a very celebratory day. I know from listening to a couple of Yankee games over the weekend when they were talking about it, the Old-Timers Day was this Sunday, this past Sunday, Father's Day, and the participants, like Paul O'Neill, who's now a Yankee broadcaster, was saying what a wonderful weekend it was, how well the Yankees put them up, and the dinners and the reception, and to blunder over one great relief pitcher's personal thoughts is ridiculous. It's childish. You know, no one would have he would have been one of 27, 30 former ball players out on the field taking his applause. It makes no sense to me. It really doesn't.
They've done it before, though, David. You know, Jim Bouton won 20 games for the Yankees back in the 60s.
Right.
He had the nerve to write a bestseller called Ball 4, which was a tell-all book about behind the scenes of baseball. And it was bestseller and number 1 on the bestseller list and so forth. But baseball got very angry with him for telling all these secrets, and nobody got angrier than the Yankees, and they refused to invite him to Old-Timers Day for years and years and years. And they finally relented a couple of years ago, but he is in bad shape these days, and so he would not be available for Old Timers Day. But for 20 years, they could have been inviting him. He was an iconic figure for that team. 20-game winner, at a time when 20-game winners were not that were celebrated, were not that frequent. And but the Yankees just thumbed their nose at him because he violated the secrecy of the game. And it's just small, in my opinion. It's a small way to go about business.
Well, the same, you can say the same thing, and I'm not defending the organization, but you can say the same thing about the way the Yankees treated Phil Rizzuto and then Yogi Berra. I mean, for years, Berra wouldn't set foot in Yankee Stadium because of the way he was treated by George Steinbrenner. And you wonder, I mean, do they have a PR person there that really knows how to control? I guess the PR person can't really control George when he was around.
George, of course, is gone. But the PR person, the guy that they have there now is a fellow named Jason Zillow. Very good guy, and he organized a program which they just completed, a community affairs program where they took players to various children's organizations and to firehouses and so forth. Got a lot of very good publicity for that. Jason,
and they do that once a year, I understand. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they do one every year. They spend a week doing that, and it's a very worthwhile cause, a very worthwhile thing to do. However, I say with a comma. However, they sometimes stumble around when it comes. And you made the good point, Rizzuto and Berra. I mean, these are two icons of the organization that put the Yankees on the map, the dynasty years. And they decided that Rizzuto was used up, and he probably was, and they had to release him. So they called him into the office on Old Timers Day, and they said, who do you think we should release? And Rizzuto said, I don't know, maybe you should take so forth and take care to get rid of so-and-so. And he said, no, you know what we're going to release on Old Timers Day? You. They released Phil Rizzuto on Old Timers Day in 1956. What an outrageous thing to do. What a slap in the face to a guy who'd been in the organization for 15 years.
Yes.
Then, of course, Yogi, they swore that Yogi would be the manager for the entire season, and it took them, I think, 15 games before they got tired and they fired him. And at least he had the conscience to say, you can't fire me, I quit. And he walked away from them for a good 15 years. He would not set foot in Yankee Stadium until the broadcaster, Susan Waldman, brokered a peace between him and Steinbrenner. But that's not how you treat your people.
No.
I mean,
no.
You have
to lay the blame for the Berra incident right at George Steinbrenner's feet. I'm not sure who pulled the Rizzuto stunt.
That was
George Weiss.
That was pre-Steinbrenner.
That was before Steinbrenner.
Yeah.
Oh, George Weiss.
Steinbrenner came in 73, so that was well before Steinbrenner.
Yeah,
right.
It was George Weiss.
Yeah.
Who is never known to be a nice guy.
No.
The way they go about business is really troubling. I mean, have a little class. You sell yourself as a class organization. Have a little class. And
it's not just the Yankees. You could look across New York, and you can pick out the New York Mets, who, when Gil Hodges passed away, they announced his successor at his funeral. They announced Yogi as his successor at his funeral with the idea that we've got all the press here anyway. We might as well save a few bucks and make the announcement right now at the funeral that Yogi Berra was going to be the manager. I thought that was fairly
very troubling to see things like this take place, because baseball is a special place, a special industry in America, in my opinion, and it deserves better treatment than that. It deserves to be celebrated. It deserves to be honored, and to just dismiss people and dismiss memories routinely as if they don't matter is troubling to me. It's very troubling to me. Goose Gossage
to not invite Gossage because he expressed his opinion. He is Bitterman. Every generation of ball players have them. Bob Feller was a Bitterman. He didn't, and Gossage is, and some guys can't accept the changing of ways in the generation. I appreciate that. We're all old school here, but to be chastised, to not be invited on something,
that's the point.
Once in a lifetime.
He's entitled to his opinion. This is America. He's entitled to speak his mind. And to punish him because he doesn't agree with your point of view just is very, very small to me. Without Goose Gossage in 1978, the New York Yankees would not have won the pennant. They would not have been in the World Series. Take my word for it. I was there. I covered that team. The Goose would come in. He was a menacing presence on the mound with his Fu Manchu mustache, a fastball that topped 95 miles an hour, and he was a central character on that team. And to ignore him, dismiss him, because he said some things you don't agree with, I just don't understand that. I don't understand that.
If you put what happened to Gossage on over the weekend against some of the things that some of the major PR flaps in the other major sports, you realize how much baseball is dependent on its history and vice versa. I mean, there have been many coaches that have been that have done outrageous things in the NBA and football coaches and players. It doesn't affect the teams or the fandom the way baseball's history coincides with the game itself. So it means
has a special place in the American law and the American picture.
That's right.
Let me say this to you. How many home runs did Babe Ruth hit? 714.
Mm-hmm.
What's the record for the most yards gained by a running back in the NFL? You don't know.
No.
Do I? Because
and who's the heavyweight champion of the world right now?
I couldn't tell you. I couldn't.
I heard it the other night, and I said, "Who?" For some reason, I heard it on.
That's what I mean about baseball.
Yeah.
Baseball,
right.
Baseball belongs in a very special place and should be treated specially by the people who run it. But sometimes the people who run baseball, it seems to me like they're trying to run it into the ground. Some of the changes, as you guys know, I am an old school character. I don't believe in analytics. I don't believe in all the changes that have been imposed on baseball. And as I wrote in the column, when's the last time you saw a sacrifice or a bunt? You don't see that. You don't see stolen bases. Everybody's swinging for the seats or striking out because that's the new approach that the analytic crowd has imposed on baseball. And
I think I think you see a good number of steal attempts. What you don't see, and you're very right about this, is batters coming to the plate and trying to break up that the three men on the right side by hitting into left field.
That's what I don't understand.
They ignore it.
A little dinger down the third baseline, you have an automatic single. You take that once a game, you're going to hit 350. I don't understand.
There's a guy in the Hall of Fame named Wee Willie Keeler.
Yeah.
He's from the Dead Ball era. Wee Willie Keeler. And you
hit
know what
they
Willie used to say? Hit them where they ain't. And that's very sensible strategy, I would say. And where they ain't is when the three guys are on the left side of the infield, there ain't nobody on the right side of the infield. And I've seen
that would
a lot
break
of
up analytics within a
games.
month. If every player started doing that, just busting the shift, it would break up the shift with it.
Well, even if a couple of players did it. I remember Mark Teixeira with the Yankees in his last 4 or 5 years. He refused when there were men on base. Or they needed a base hit to get a rally going. He refused to try to go to left field. He hit to the opposing second baseman time and time again. It was just a disgrace to watch that man perform, and with all the talent that he had.
I never played ball. I mean, I played stickball in the streets in the Bronx, yeah, but I never played baseball. And I know that hitting a baseball with a bat is not an easy thing to do, especially if the pitcher's throwing 90 miles an hour. I can understand that. And controlling the direction where you hit it can be very difficult. But I can't believe that it's impossible to stick your bat out and bunt the ball down the third base line, as Ralph said a minute ago. You beat out a bunt for a base hit. You're on first base. That's the idea of the game. Get on base. But they just don't care to do it. They just don't.
They don't care to move runners over. You never see a guy just intentionally hit a ground ball to second base, get that runner in scoring position. Another single brings him in. Boom.
Absolutely.
Well, Derek Jeter lived by hitting the ball to the opposite field. One of his classic, if you think of Derek Jeter at the plate, what does he do? He hits the right field. I mean, when he isn't swinging, he hits the right field to move runners up. He did that all the time. And nobody else does
David Wright was the same way with the Mets.
Yeah.
Bat control. But, I appreciate that it's a difficult task.
It is. Sure.
The ball is not that difficult. You stick your bat in front of the pitch and the bunt goes down. So, I mean, why not bunt to get on base, to start a rally? The other night, the Mets, by some miracle of God, they were trailing 3-1 in the ninth inning at Arizona, and 2 out, nobody on, and Jose Reyes, who's batting about 139, is at the plate. Well, talk about hopeless. The game is over, right? Well, Reyes lays down a bunt of all things and beats it out because the catcher on the Arizona team, Vila, fielded the bunt. It was going foul, but he decided to grab the ball, and Reyes beat it out. The next thing you know, the Mets scored 4 runs and won the game 5-3. So, anything can happen. That's the beauty of baseball. It's unpredictable. And by dropping a bunt down, they started a rally. Reyes started a rally, which turned into a win for a much-needed win for the Mets. So
may have turned the tide for the season, Hal.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Really nice. And another thing, the Mets have the lowest ERA in baseball, or at least in the National League, since early May. And things could turn. I'm an eternal optimist as a Met fan, or else I jump off the.
Has to be.
Yes.
You really do have to be. I got to admit that I've given up on them, and I can't watch their games. They do too many things that offend me, so I try not to watch their games. Even though I love their announcers, Keith Hernandez and Ron Darling and Gary Cohn are wonderful announcers and give you great insight into the game. But the way the Mets play or have played in the first, third of the season, it just offends me sometimes, and I just can't watch it. And I can't watch the American League. I can't watch the Yankees because I hate the designated hitter. So I'm left here on an island with no baseball, essentially no baseball. And that's
you managed to keep up on the Mets a little bit. You heard that comeback Sunday, I guess it was.
Yes.
Well, I predict that one day, very soon, the DH is going to make its appearance in the National League.
I'm afraid
That's
you're
my
right.
prediction.
I'm afraid you're right. It saddens me greatly because I believe that it's an offensive change to the way the game is supposed to be played and affects the strategy of the game. But I can see it coming. I'm smart enough to see it coming simply because the National League is the only league that includes the American Association and the Pacific Coast League and on and on and on. The National League is the only league that does not have the DH. And pitchers are getting hurt running the bases. Now, they shouldn't be. They should be athletes who can run the bases. But we had a pitcher here in New York the other night, Tanaka of the Yankees, the Japanese pitcher, who strained both his hamstrings trying to score on a sacrifice fly. It's kind of comical.
It is kind of comical. Just two hamstrings on one play. That's
right. Well, at least ties the record. Be able to run. They used to be. I don't know if they still do, but pitchers used to run in the outfield between starts.
That's right. I was just thinking of that.
Well,
yep, because the legs are so important.
I don't understand it.
Yeah,
that could be one of the reasons that could be one of the reasons for the increase in injuries is that
I wrote a
strain on the arm where the legs were taken over.
The Mets have a boatload of injuries this year. Now, they had a boatload of injuries last year, and they decided to clean out their medical staff. So they fired the trainer, they fired the strength coach, they fired everybody, and they got a whole new medical staff in here. And now they've got 15 guys on the disabled list. Well, wait a minute. How is this possible? You can't
and I also want to know, how is it possible that Alderson is getting so much heat for putting this team together when along the way, everybody that he picked up, he re-signed Bruce, I liked it. Everybody liked it. He signed Vargas, I liked it. Everybody liked it. What could have he done more, and why is he getting so much heat? Hal, I'll ask you.
Well, it's easy to blame the guy who made the moves, and when the moves don't work. Vargas has been pretty much a disaster. Jay Bruce just went on the disabled list today, and he's been terrible. He's been hurt, but he's also been terrible. He re-signed Reyes. Reyes is hitting about 140. He signed a relief pitcher, Anthony Swazik. The first week of the season, he pulled his groin or he pulled his something or other, and he was out for 2 months. This is hurtful.
Well, it was his own groin he pulled, so that was in his favor. But he's back, and Gazelman is relieving. Familia is coming off the DL.
Yes,
they got a good catcher for Harvey. But
he's always hurt, too. He's been hurt several times the last several years.
But he's been healthy with the Mets. That's true.
Yes, he has.
And he's a step up over Diarno and Pilecki. And as I say,
you would be a step up over those guys.
I probably would, and that's a little scary. But I appreciate the compliment. It's the most anybody ever said about my ball playing ability, Hal. And
I've never seen you play, but I'm just assuming. But I've seen Pilecki and Darno play. So.
You've read acclaims. That would be a nice, polite way of saying it. You've heard my reputation.
Right. Right.
Okay, good enough. David,
yes.
What was the worst atrocity in ownership that you can recall over the years? Just ownership to player. Just off the top of your head. Anything?
Oh, well, as I mentioned earlier, Phil Rizzuto was my favorite ball player growing up. My dog is named after him now, because we got him just after Phil Rizzuto died. So we have Phil. We have Phil the dog.
You don't call him Scooter.
No, we can't call him Scooter because of Scooter Libby, but we don't want the connection made. So we call him Phil, and which is fine. He doesn't mind it at all, and he sits and watches some ball games with me at night. But I guess I had forgotten that it was George Weiss, who was really a nemesis to many of the ball players on that club, who pulled that stunt with Rizzuto, and I was really upset by that. The the saving grace for Rizzuto himself was that he came back as a Yankee broadcaster, and he lasted, 30 years, Hal, broadcasting Yankee games?
40 years.
40 years. I mean,
he bit his tongue and waited a year and came back.
Yep. And he came back as a broadcaster. He was such a fan favorite that there was a whole generation that really didn't know that he'd been a ball player on the team. In fact, most people sort of associated him with those the commercials for that loan company that he did on TV for many years. But yeah, he did come back. He swallowed his pride, and they heard him, as you said, as you pointed out, on Old-Timers Day. That was probably the cruelest blow that I can think of.
What a slap in the face, you know?
Yeah, awful, just awful. You know, Weiss is the same guy who told Mantle that he couldn't have a raise after his Triple Crown year because he didn't repeat it. He said, well, you didn't have as good a year as 57.
Right. And Weiss was the guy that shoveled off Billy Martin after the Copacabana fight.
That's right. Yes.
That he wasn't even a part of. It was Hank Bauer, by all accounts, that smacked that guy. And Weiss hated Stengel, really. They worked together, but I don't think they.
Well, he couldn't get rid of him because he was so successful until finally, you know. And the Yankees actually did the same thing. Mel Allen, the voice of the Yankees, they let him go after Koufax and the Dodgers shut out the Yankees in the World Series in, 63? And because as Koufax was pitching this great game, Allen broke down. And he really, he wasn't sobbing out loud, but he was really choked up by the fact that the Yankees were going to lose this World Series. And right after that, they fired him.
Well, they said there might have been some alcoholic beverages that went along with that.
Yeah, but the great Red Smith once wrote, "Rooting for the Yankees is like rooting for U.S. Steel." You know, they're a heartless corporate operation. Well, I use the phrase "button down," which is what they are. They're a button-down organization. Now, some people love that. Some people think that's great. And in many ways it is when you compare it to the comedy show in Flushing. You know, the Mets are the best example I can offer you of the difference is the Mets have this cartoon character, Mr. Met, bouncing around the stands and bouncing around the field. The Yankees don't have a mascot. That would be beneath them, you know?
Right.
So it's a different approach to your fans. I don't know. Maybe the Yankees are right. Maybe they are a corporate crowd that follows the Yankees. I don't know. I'm not a corporate guy.
Well, you know, they have other traditions that they follow religiously besides not having a mascot. No names on the back of the uniforms. They've never changed the uniforms. You know, they have certain almost religious rites that they follow.
That's right.
And yet every once in a while, something like this pops up, and they screw it up royally. They really do.
I would have loved to be a fly on the wall between Cashman and Goose Gossage when they had it out.
Goose never stood for any malarkey or any nonsense. Goose always spoke his mind, which was one of the reasons the writers loved him. You could always go to him in the clubhouse and get an honest assessment of what the hell was going on here. And in fact, Goose missed some time. I think it was the following year, after 78, he got into a clubhouse fight with Cliff Johnson because Johnson said something he didn't like. And they started scuffling, and Goose hurt his thumb and was out for quite some time, and that hurt the team. But, you know, he's a very honest, forthright guy, and he speaks his mind. And here in America, that's a celebrated trait. Speak your mind. Listen, whatever you think is you're entitled to your opinion, and if it bothers or ruffles the feathers of your boss, well, that's too bad. But in this case...
you know, what comes to mind there is Reggie Jackson speaking his mind about one is convicted, one's a liar, and the other one's convicted.
That was Billy Martin. Billy Martin.
Yeah, Billy Martin.
About Reggie and
said it about Steinbrenner and Reggie. Well,
yeah.
Billy Martin was a racist. I mean, I covered that team. I saw that act. And there's no question in my mind that Billy Martin was a racist. He hated black players, and he particularly hated Reggie Jackson.
Wow. And, you know, Hal, I've spoken with Peter Golenbach, with Lenny Randall, with with Billy Martin Jr. So he's revered by black players, is Billy Martin. He might have appeared to be a racist with, I can't say he appeared to be a racist, but, you know, a lot of mixed reviews.
Listen, I know he was an anti-Semite. I mean, he took off on Jewish writers all the time.
Really?
Of which there were many.
Right.
Of which there were many, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. He was not a nice man, Ralph.
No, that for sure. He had his demons. I mean, the booze was the demons. He wasn't a nice man.
Without question.
I'm hearing the fact that he's a racist for the first time. So
I think he was. I really do.
Okay. I'm not arguing from the standpoint of.
I mean, he had it in for Reggie from the day that Reggie signed. He didn't want Reggie, and George Steinbrenner wanted that star power that Reggie Jackson represented, and so he signed Reggie Jackson. He didn't ask Billy's permission. He signed him. And Reggie was a star. Reggie was a star in Oakland, and he was a star in Baltimore, and he was going to be a star here in New York. And you remember the famous quote in spring training when he talked about Thurman Munson, who was the captain of the team, and he said, I'm the straw that stirs the drink. Munson can't stir it. He stirs it bad. Well, that was kind of a stupid thing for Reggie to say, but it really caused a lot of havoc in that clubhouse.
And part of the reason Steinbrenner really enjoyed signing him was he was taking him away from the Orioles. Reggie only stayed 1 year with Baltimore. And
that's right. It's true.
So that's, another slap at because at that time the Orioles were a pretty good contending team.
And, they traded their best player. They traded Don Baylor to the A's to get Reggie in the first place. So it really did hurt the Orioles. You're right. Absolutely right. What can I say?
The star power in the mid-'70s, you could not do much better than Reggie Jackson. Reggie, I mean, he was a highlight film. Mr. October, home runs. I saw him in the World Series in 1977 hit 3 home runs on 3 pitches.
Right.
I never saw anything like that. On consecutive
and hadn't
pitches
he,
at the plate.
Hal, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't he hit a home run his previous last at bat in the previous game?
Yes, sir. He certainly did in Los Angeles.
Right. Yeah, so it's 4 straight home runs.
World Series.
Yeah, they don't mention that. 4 straight home runs and 4 World Series at bats, consecutive at bats.
And that's a star. That's a guy, a special character that the limelight will always shine on him. So George knew that, and George went out and got him. Billy was not happy about the whole thing. Billy didn't want him. What can I tell you?
Yeah.
It was a bad time to be covering that team because you never knew what was going to happen next.
Or a good time to be covering that team. How exciting it must have been. How easy to get a scoop.
Oh, are you kidding? Give me serenity, will you? I went up there one night. I wanted to cover the late Catfish Hunter had been sidelined, and he was coming back to make a start after being on the disabled list, I don't know, for a month or so. And I thought, well, that's a good column, Catfish coming back. So I went up there for that game. It was a night game. And Catfish pitched his 6 innings or so, whatever it was, and I was going to write this column. and I waited till after the game because you got to get access to the players after the game. And I went into the clubhouse, and you always had to go into the Yankee clubhouse because you never knew what was going to happen. And I went into the clubhouse, and it was all mayhem because Reggie had refused to bunt. Billy had flashed a bunt sign. Reggie swung away. Billy went slightly nuts and threw a clock against the wall. Oh, it was just an ugly scene. And here am I looking for a nice, easy, quiet evening at the ballpark. Nice, easy column. Catfish, God rest his soul, was a wonderful, wonderful guy to talk to. And all of a sudden, I'm in the middle of mayhem. So, that was the way it was up there in those days. And let me tell you, I don't miss it, believe me.
The Bronx Zoo, that's what it was called.
That's right. That's what it was called.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever consider doing a book on that era?
Golenbach did it, didn't he?
I think
Didn't Golenbach write?
Madden,
yeah.
Book?
And a Madden. Golenbach did a book on Steinbrenner himself, and he also wrote and co-wrote a couple of books on Billy. And I don't know.
I have to ask you, Hal. Were you there when the Post's Henry Hecht was covering the team?
I'm sorry, when what?
The Post sports writer Henry Hecht.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
He got into a big brouhaha with Billy Martin, from what I understand, too.
Absolutely. I think his Jewishness offended Billy.
Yeah, well, he'd been a camper of mine in a camp years earlier, and he was he had an incredible temper. So if he went up against Billy Martin, it was one damn temper against another. I'll tell you.
Whoa,
that shows how old I am, right?
Lenny Randall defended Billy against Henry Hecht once.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah, and I don't remember the context, but I've got it on a Lenny Randall's Corner show and an interview. Henry Hecht was not very well liked.
Well, Henry could be an annoying presence. I
yes.
can tell you that. I remember, this is funny. During the World Series one year, we were in Cincinnati, and Henry got into it with a guy named Wells Twombly. Wells worked for the San Francisco Chronicle.
Yes. And
Wells was about 6'4" and about 300 pounds. I mean, he was a big man. And Henry was a little weasel of a guy.
Mm-hmm.
And they got into it. We're going to have a fight in the press box. Wait a minute. We can't have a fight in the press box. We're here to cover the World Series. So we had to pull them apart and calm them down. But that was quite a scene also. This will all be in my memoirs.
I hope you're working on them.
No, I'm not. I'm retired. I only do your show. That's all I do. And how
are you going to do your memoirs then? If you retire,
no,
most people do retire.
They're oral memoirs. Believe it or not, what we are doing.
My wife yells at me about that. She says, "You have such great stories. You should write them down." I'm not writing them down. They're in my brain. They live in my head.
Well, talking to a recorder and have somebody transcribe them.
I'm finished writing, I'll tell you that. Other than this little column that I do once a week, and it keeps me occupied. And then I get to talk to Ralph and David on Tuesday nights and George, and that keeps me happy too.
And so Alan,
I'm very happy in my retirement.
Well, and when we're off the air, Hal, remind me to tell you a story about Henry that I don't think we should just spread around. But
okay,
all right. So let's close it out. We'll all three stay on the line. I'll get to hear that story too, and I want to thank you guys for another edition of Bock Score with Hal Bock. David Hubler's been the guest. I'm Ralph Tycho, obviously the weak link of all of this from the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and it's my pleasure to talk to you guys Tuesday nights. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you out there for listening. I'm going to close it out. Stay on the line, guys. We'll talk Henry.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night.
Everyone will know. Thank you, gentlemen.